Hey Tank, how are you?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for having me on today.
You bet, man. It's an honor to have you on the show. I always say this when I have former football players or current football players. It's always cool to have you on the show to talk shop. Considering I played football not as long as you did,
Mhm.
but playing at the collegiate level, it's just always cool to bring people on to understand your mindset as an athlete, how it helped you through your collegiate and professional career, and how it actually allowed you to actually transition a sport and be the entrepreneur that you are today.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's get into it. Talk about mental toughness. I can only imagine, and I remember watching you back in the day when you were playing for Stanford, and started as a freshman,
hmm
which takes a lot of mental fortitude, but um, witnessed a lot of moments where you had to be mentally tough. So when you think about mental toughness, what does that mean to you?
For me, mental toughness is learning how to deal with adversity. I believe, as we've learned in life, no matter who you are, is that things aren't always going to go your way. And it's how you deal with that adversity that is the true testament of the person that you end up becoming. And so for me, speaking to my Stanford experience, I actually was the last guy to receive a scholarship in my recruiting class. So out of like the 20 something people, how many people they brought in my recruiting class, I was the last one. Actually, someone decided to decommit, go to Notre Dame, and then I ended up getting that scholarship after the fact. And so being the last guy coming in and actually earning a spot to actually play my true freshman year, that's just kind of one example of how, I kind of turn adversity into my favor where, you seem like you're overlooked and that you may not have a chance. And so you say, hey, they're not expecting that much from me. I'm gonna just go out there and work each and every day, try to put my best foot forward and then see what happens. And fortunately enough for me, I was able to play a significant role my true freshman year at Stanford.
Yeah, absolutely. And throughout your year at Stanford, or years at Stanford, man, you were a mainstay on the defense. And I know you talked about that particular moment, especially when you started your collegiate career. But when you reflect on your whole collegiate career and your professional career, can you share a specific time with my listeners where you had to be mentally tough, whether if it was a crucial fourth down or a certain game or a conversation you had with a coach or an opponent? Like, was there a specific moment where you had to be mentally tough?
I think for me, it was the first time I hurt my knee. I had a significant ACL tear. So when I was in high school, I wasn't really heavily recruited because I had injuries with my back where I would be able to play like the first half of my senior year high school games. And then like the second half, a lot of times I couldn't play because my back would just kind of lock up on me. And so when it came down to it, like my only scholarship offers were Stanford and Central Florida. I ended up choosing Stanford and then, played all 4 years and got drafted to the NFL. And I never really had to deal with any injuries, from that point moving forward. And so my third year in the league, I had a significant knee injury where I tore my ACL. And that's my first time feeling where, I wasn't invincible. And
Mm,
so, having that mindset, one, where you have to battle back from an injury and not knowing how your body's going to respond, not knowing how you're going to mentally respond. And those are just things that you can control. And yet at the same time, is the team going to try to draft someone to take my place? And so there's all these other things that swirl around. But I think you just come to the mindset that you can only control what you can control. And so for me, that was one, just trying to work each and every day in the training room to make sure that my knee was as healthy as possible once I was able to come back that following season. Try to stay up on film and at the same time try to make sure that I was mentally prepared to handle anything that may come about, whether it's like my knee swelling up in practice, understanding that I'm gonna have to deal with some of those little flare ups here and there, but that's not going to deter me from my ultimate goal. And so I think it was just having that mentality that there's going to be adversity that comes in waves. And it's how you deal with that mentally and kind of push through, whether it's a little bit of pain, a little bit of swelling, a little bit of outside forces that you may not be able to handle, whether it's through the organization or the coaches, and just try to make sure that you put your best foot forward and handle what you can handle, then let the chips fall where they may. And for me, I was able to kind of bounce back, get healthy, and then, recapture my starting role that following year.
yeah, I love that you bring up injury. And I say this because I got into what I do now as a mental performance coach because I dealt with a career-ending injury in college. I've had two hip replacements on the same
Mm,
hip, and And so one of my biggest motivators of doing this type of work is to work with injured athletes. And so I know firsthand, not only with myself, but working with tons of other athletes at all levels, all the different emotions that you have to deal with on the front end of your injury, especially ACL. And then you have to deal with all the emotions during rehab. And then after, when you're quote unquote, your body is ready to go, but is it, right? And then you have to deal with those alien things that come up like swelling. How did you deal with all the different levels of your rehab emotionally? How did you deal with it?
I think what was helpful for me is that I had a really good support system in place. You know, my family supported me through thick and thin. And so that was definitely helpful. But then at the same time, I think, it just comes back to how you've dealt with adversity in the past. Like I said, I've had this experience in high school where it was coming to like a back injury. I've had adversity in various points of my life, and it may not always be applicable to the football field, but at the same time, you learn that things may not always go your way, and that is how you respond. And so I think just having that ingrained in me from such a young age, it was just something I was always able to fall back on. Like, this is just what we do. Like, there are going to be hard times that come into your life. Not like everything is not going to be perfect, but how are
Right.
you going to respond? Like, no one's just going to give you something. You have to go out there and take it. And so when it came to my knee injury, it's not like you can go out there and take your job back, but I can go out there and attack my rehab and take my health back and make sure I'm putting myself in the best position to come back healthy and strong as ever. So it's always like a way, I think, to kind of flip something in your head mentally that allows you to just kind of persevere through the pain, persevere through the fear. Because I mean, there is a lot of that when you deal with those significant injuries. And so it's any way that you can do to try to motivate yourself to come out that next day a little bit stronger, a little bit, bouncier with your
Right.
knee, your joints, whatever it is, just to try to come out a little bit healthier that next day and just keep stacking days on top of days and just understand it's not going to all happen at once. And I think when you take that approach, it sets you up for success.
You've competed at the highest level, and so throughout the different levels of your career, obviously you have a certain mindset. How would you describe your mindset as an athlete? And when you got to the NFL, how much did your mindset change or did it stay the same?
Uh, there's definitely an evolution. It's one of those things like a lot of people play sports in high school and you always have doubts about like how you can play at the next level. Like when you go to play ball in college, you're like the best guy on your high school team, and then you go to college and then you try to sort yourself out and see where you fit on your team.
Right.
And then after I got drafted from Stanford to the NFL, it's like, all right, like I'm this small kid from like a small town in Mississippi. Like I got the last scholarship to Stanford, like somehow, some way I got drafted second round to Tennessee when there's a lot of other guys who had more name recognition than me coming out of college. And so, like, how am I going to sort myself out in the NFL? And it's one of those things where it's always easy to doubt whether you belong, whether it's at work, whether it's like, a corporate job, or whether it's, a student in class, or whether you're playing in the NFL, college, whatever it may be. But then I think the preparation was the key, just making sure I worked as hard as possible to make sure I knew my place so I wouldn't make any mental mistakes. I trained my tail off leading up to training camp to make sure I was in the best condition as possible. And then you just try to go out there and you execute. And I mean, it sounds really simple, but one thing that I always kind of pride myself on, whether it's sports related or in business, is like luck happens when preparation meets opportunity. And so as long as I
Yeah.
put all those things together, hopefully like they mesh at the right time and good things happen. And fortunate enough for me, those things happen more than not throughout the early parts of my career.
You talked about fitting in, and because I know this, being an athlete and working with athletes, the environment is important when you're in a healthy environment, or you feel safe when you become into a new team. And coming from Mississippi to California, when 17, 18 years old, being the last, being the last scholarship on your team, did that put a chip on your shoulder? Did that play around at all with your mindset? And then also, when you went to the NFL, you were drafted in the second round, which is amazing, right? So did you feel this pressure when you were going to the NFL, like the pressure going into Stanford? Did you feel that pressure, and how did you deal with it?
I think just speaking about it from the college aspect, when I got there, knowing that I was the last scholarship off of my class and that there were all these other guys who signed with Stanford like months before they even thought about me, like I felt like there was no pressure. And then at the same time, once I got there and I started making plays early on in the process and I had a feeling that I can play, I was like, well, it's not about where you start, it's where you finish. And I felt I belonged. And
Mm,
then when I spin it forward to the NFL, like whenever you get drafted in like the first few rounds, there's going to be automatic pressure on you because if someone's investing that high of a draft pick than you, they're expecting you to be able to perform immediately. Yet at the same time, I mean, there are guys who have been there before me and that almost like felt like they deserved to play before I did, even though I was a second round pick. And unfortunately for me, I pulled my hamstring early in training camp. But
wow.
the crazy thing is that, it was one of those things too where I just told myself I'm going to control what I can control. I wasn't able to participate on the practice field, but like I stayed in the books in my playbook, stayed on top of things and meetings. And so I actually was able to play the last preseason game, play well then, and then start every game from the first game moving forward my rookie year. And so that was one of those things where a lot of carryover from things that may have happened to me in the past carried over to my NFL career where I'm like, all right, I may not be able to, function on the field, but I'm gonna be as mentally prepared as possible. So when that opportunity presents itself, I'll be able to take advantage. And then that was one situation where, even though I felt like there may have been a lot of pressure on me, I didn't really let it get to me too much. I just controlled what I could, and then I just let my play speak for itself.
As we talk about pressure and preparation, and I know this for top athletes that come out of the college ranks, that go into the combine. I mean, just let alone the combine itself has a
Mhm.
ton of pressure, and I've seen it cripple people because they put so much into. And I get it; it's the stage, it's the door that opens up your career. When you were going through the combine, like what was your mindset like? What was your preparation like? And when you're there being evaluated, how did you deal with that? Or did you just trust yourself and just go?
It's funny because I feel like I'm gonna sound like, like I'm beating the same drum. I was actually like, helping to mentor this guy who's preparing for the NFL draft this year. And we were speaking about the combine, and I told him it was one of those things where I went into the combine knowing that I worked my ass off and that I was going to put my best foot forward. And so, a lot of people like they get ready to run a 40-yard dash and there's like they're kind of apprehensive because there's like every GM, head coach, and all these assistant coaches watching you. But like I knew all the hard work I put in. So man, I pulled off my shirt. I mean, I felt like I was in the best shape that I'd ever been in my life. And I hopped up and I was weighing 230 pounds. And then I ran like a low 4.4. I actually had like a 4.38 on the stopwatch. And so when you kind of push that time in, it's like, yeah, like I came here to, show that I'm
Showed up.
worthy. And so I think that was probably one of the first things that really put me on the map. Like I was actually surprised that I got drafted in the second round, but I really do believe, along with the play that I put on tape my 4 years at Stanford, it was really like showing how hard I was willing to work and how much I improved my speed, footwork, and everything else between the end of my season up to draft day to show that, you may have seen some good stuff on tape, but when it comes to me in actuality, like I'm gonna continue to work hard and the sky's gonna be the limit.
Yeah. And you talk about all like you worked your ass off and you put all that work in. Take me to the night when you got drafted in the second round. You've been playing this game for years. You put in all this sweat and tears, and you've grinded it out. What was that moment like?
Man, it was an amazing feeling. Actually, my parents had like all my family get together at my parents' house, and my sister lives in the same town. So I was actually at my sister's house with both of my folks. And so I was in a separate room, a little nervous because I had no idea where I was going to get drafted. So I didn't want people coming up to me like every 5, 10 minutes, like, when are you going? When are you going? So I'm actually in the room, and there's like a TV delay. So the Titans called me. I'm actually on the phone with the GM, and then I guess a minute or two later, they announced it on TV. And so my mom, like, and my dad bust in the room, like, "You think you just got drafted?" I'm like, "I know, I'm on the phone with them right now." And so that was a really cool moment because then after I hopped off the phone, I was able to celebrate just with my mom and my dad personally, just like the three of us. And then after that, go to my folks' house and then celebrate it with my extended family. And so it was amazing dream where, I'm like a small kid from Mississippi. I always grew up admiring Jerry Rice. He went to the same college as my parents, but I never thought that I'd play in the NFL. And so to be able to kind of go to Stanford, get a great education there, and then accomplish a dream that I never really thought I had the opportunity to do, and that's playing NFL. It was pretty special and still a pretty special moment for me.
Wow, that's beautiful, man. And I love asking this question since we are kind of sticking on the theme of mindset here. But again, whether if it was in your collegiate career or NFL career, when you look back at your career, what do you think is your biggest mental win, and what is your biggest mental fail?
I think my biggest mental fail is sometimes you have to take chances. I was a player who loved to watch film, understand what the opposing team was trying to do to me. But at the same time, I didn't want to do too much. And I think when you look at a lot of the great players who play the game, whether it's like guys like Ed Reed, who's known for being a ball hawk. And, I feel like, my football IQ was just right up there with those types of guys, but I just didn't take as many chances. And I can recall like a couple plays in particular where like I did a bunch of the film study going into the game. I see the formation come up and I'm like, man, I think this is going to be the play. And they end up running the play. And instead of just like jumping it, you're just like a little too apprehensive and then you just end up breaking the play, breaking it up and end up being an incompletion versus like making a splash play where you pick it off and running for a touchdown. So I would say that my one regret is knowing that I'm prepared but not taking advantage of the opportunity. And I've tried to learn from those mistakes that happened when I was playing ball and make sure I don't make the same mistakes in my professional life and life after football. And I think as far as like the best decision was will you say the best decision I've made?
Just like either mental win, like where
Mental
you
win.
you just you were locked into the moment and you didn't let whatever the situation or the game or anybody that distract you. You just stayed in the moment and did your job.
Um, I mean, I think one game in particular that I was locked in. My most memorable game was a Monday night football game. We played Green Bay, and I'm from a small town in Mississippi, and actually Brett Favre went to my rival high school.
Oh
My
wow.
dad coached against Brett Favre. My dad was my high school, like he was the coach in my local high school, and Brett's dad was the coach at like the rival high school. Brett was the quarterback at that time. Obviously, he's a lot older than I am, and so to have the opportunity to play against Brett on Monday Night Football, where everyone from my area is like watching us, and I actually picked them off on one play, and I think I scooped up a fumble or something like that on another one. I was like on the Madden horse trailer, like when Madden was calling the games, and so like me and two other guys were on the horse trailer, and so I think that was one of those games where I was locked in the entire week, understanding what they were going to do in the game. That was actually a situation where I saw the play coming and I shot my shot and I actually jumped the route and I had the interception in that game. So that's like how you can just look at the polar opposite where like in that situation where it's a memorable time in the game for me from when I was locked in, it was focused. It's not about not knowing what I was doing or knowing I was doing. It was taking the chance, like that
Yeah.
calculated risk and actually taking advantage of it versus like understanding what's coming to me and then not shooting my gun, not making that, not taking the risk, and then losing out on like the ultimate reward.
Right. It's like ultimate trust. In the moment, you're just like, and also when you see it, like since you prepared for it, you see it in slow motion, but it's actually really
Oh,
fast, but it's a slow motion. But you trust yourself. And that to me is they call it the zone, they call it flow, call it whatever you want to call it. But it's such a beautiful feeling where when you trust yourself and it's risky, but
yeah.
it all works out the end.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think and it's hard to replicate that feeling outside of ball.
Yeah.
But there have been like some moments like post NFL, like because I've dabbled in a whole bunch of stuff, whether it's like developing real estate and managing my investment portfolio and working in commercial real estate and all that. And there's been like a couple projects that I worked on, or a couple trades that I've made where I've put in the work, I've done the due diligence, and whether it's like a real estate property where it takes about a year to purchase the property, kind of tear it down, rebuild it, hit the market at the right time and sell it for an outcome that you were expecting, or doing due diligence on the stock and buying in at the right price. And then, seeing that, the hard work, the due diligence that you put in, and the anticipation of what you think the stock is going to do based on like the news that was coming out, and actually like materializes, like those are really good wins that make you feel good, because it's like all about the preparation that you put in order to kind of reach this outcome. And so those things are similar, but still at the same time, you don't have like, tens of thousands of people cheering you while you're doing that. So it's a little bit different.
Right. Totally. Well, and before we get into transitioning out of sport into what you do now, it's funny because I talked to you before the show how I have another show with Jake Plummer,
Mhm.
and when we bring on quarterbacks and quarterback coaches, we talk about the feel of when you're rolling out and you throw the perfect pass. It's at the corner, you drop a dime, or you spin it, in a tight pocket. There's this feeling as a quarterback, like, so we always talk about the words that come up. So you playing on the other side of the ball, playing defense, when you light somebody up or you have perfect form and you just light somebody up, how would you describe that feeling?
Oh, it's I don't know if I can. I mean, it's just because I mean that was one of my favorite things to do, is like diagnose a play and then just come down full steam ahead. And you can't hit guys in the NFL like we
Right.
used to back in those days. And so like I was known for like laying the hammer on folks. And when you run through someone, and instead of it being like this big collision, even though it is, it almost feels like you just slicing through butter, because I mean, it's just that perfect mesh, and just being able to run through someone. And it's like the culmination of being in the right place, right time, which means that you understood what the team was trying to do to you. You executed, and it was like a splash play. And everyone wants to make those splash plays. And so, I mean, to have that feeling like where you just have that self validation that you did everything right that play, and it was on display for everyone in the stadium, everyone watching on TV, like, man, that's just a crazy feeling that I mean, a lot of guys go on years after they retire trying to, find that feeling again. And it's
Totally.
like we just talked about, it's really hard to replicate.
Totally. And I totally feel it when you say butter, because sometimes like you're putting so much force,
Yeah.
especially at the NFL level. I mean, there's bigger people, faster people. So I can only imagine what that would feel like. I think for me, especially when I throw a beautiful pass, it's like this smooth exhilaration, this joy, just like, but there's a connection. And I know at the core of me, and it's hard for me to explain. I can only imagine it's the same thing for you. It's like at the core of you, you know exactly what you feel like when you just completely lay somebody out with perfect form.
Yeah, because it's like one of those things where you just dialed into your game, and it's like I'm gonna put my fingerprint on this game, because there's nothing that they can do to me in the run or pass game that I cannot stop. And that's how it feels for us. But I mean, I imagine for a quarterback, it has to be similar to like basketball players when you see them get in the zone, where it's like a
Oh yeah.
Steph Curry or someone like that that just
Totally.
can't miss from the three or something like that. Like, I played quarterback in high school, but I didn't have an arm like anybody that could play quarterback in college. And so I can only imagine like being dialed in where you're reading defenses, you know what the defense is trying to do to you. You throw into the right receivers, and every ball is a dime. Like, I mean, that has to be like an unbelievable feeling. And we all have our ways to kind of get in the zone. But I think one thing that all that speaks to is that whether it's like someone shooting like Steph Curry shooting threes, or you throwing perfect passes, or me diagnosing plays that the offense is trying to do to me, it's everything that we did up until that point that prepared us for that moment. And so that's why we're able to execute. Without that preparation
Yeah.
before, that wouldn't happen.
Total 100%. I mean, you're preaching the gospel there, man. And because you just shared that, I'm just out of curiosity, did you have a routine before you played, like to get you locked in? Is there certain things that you did in the locker room, or is there certain things that you put on, like wristband, whatever it is, tape, writing stuff? Was there a routine that you followed?
I mean, when my former teammates would say that, I was probably like the worst dressed cat on the field. It looked like it looked like I played back in the 70s or something like that, the way I looked at my uniform. I mean, but I will say that I was a creature of habit. Like I had like a similar playlist that I would listen to every time. And like I would go up and I would do like my same individual warm up before each and every game. And whenever I would like go out on the field, like, we'll have like we listen to the national anthem and they'll have the flyover. And like I would always stand on the same yard line and kind of do the same thing. And so, I mean, I think we're creatures of habits. And especially like when we have success doing something, it's kind of easy to kind of, continue on that pattern. And so there was
Yeah,
definitely like that mindset I had to where I wanted to kind of stay locked and stay loaded and not have too much of a departure for what, I was accustomed to doing because I felt like it benefited me.
totally. Absolutely. I know for me, man, as soon as I put my towel, right when I put it in my pants and I looked myself in the mirror, it was like, I don't know, the Rocky song came
Right.
on. I was like, yep, it's like, here it is, you know?
Yeah,
And
party boy time.
exactly. And I had done that since Pop Warner all the way through college. And it was like, I don't know, it just got to the point, it got stronger and stronger the more that I did it. It's like, it meant something to me. And if I didn't have a chance, I don't think it ever happened for the most part, but it meant a lot to me to finish that part of the routine, to see myself completely like dialed in. But that towel, that was, I don't know if that was a symbol of me being a quarterback, but
Mhm.
it just locked me in.
Like one thing that actually reminds me of too, and like this is probably more of a kind of decisive moment. Like we had like little mirrors in it was either like in our locker or I would go and I throw on my shoulder pads like in the bathroom. And it was always one of those things where I kind of felt normal and kind of myself. And I can recall now like throwing my shoulder pads over my head. And it was like as soon as my pads came over my head, and then I kind of strapped them up. It's like you turn into a whole like different person. Like
Yeah.
you locked in is like game mode at that time. And like that was something that just kind of came back to me that I really hadn't thought about before. But that's one of those other things where you just kind of lock in and like everything that you put into that week is just kind of set at that moment. And then it's just go.
It's the switch is what I
Yeah.
call it. And the
Yeah.
switch it could be putting that towel on, putting the pads on, or stepping on the green grass, or, hitting play like champions today, whatever it's that switch.
Hmm.
And I think once you can develop it and understand what that switch is, that's when you learn you let go of who you are and you become this athlete. It's what you do. Right. And it's that switch of being, I call it the warrior mindset, how we switch into it. And
Hmm.
that physical thing is it's powerful, super powerful. So before we get into talking a little bit about what you're doing now, and how your athletic background, your experience has helped you transition into an entrepreneur, I, I want to throw this out there just because obviously we're living this pandemic, especially you and I being in California. Sports have been um, non-existent for the most part. Considering all the mental health issues that are arising at high school at the collegiate level, if you were playing today in high school or even college, how would you deal with this time?
It's pretty interesting because you have to actually like rewind and try to think about what your mindset was like
Yeah,
in college. I mean, I think back then I would have probably just continued on with my routine, whether it's like just kind of focusing on what I could do on a daily basis. And that's going and getting my workouts in. And whether it's like with teammates or by myself, getting drills in, making sure I'm up to speed on tape and things like that. And if I'm in summer school, making sure I'm on top of my studies and just handling and controlling everything that I can control. And I feel like that's basically like what we're doing during this time as well. But when I look at it from the perspective that I have now, whether you feel like you're managing this time right or not, I believe, especially being an athlete and with so much on your plate, it helps to be able to talk to someone. I mean, I think mental health is definitely important. And I think there's a lot of people who've had success from being able to have conversation with folks, whether it's like serious issues that they're dealing with or just confidence issues when it comes to sports. And I believe like that there I think in the past there was always like this stigma around like being able to talk to people or having doubts and stuff like that. And you've seen like a lot of professional athletes come out and say, whether it was Dak Prescott or some other guys, say that they've had, issues, whether it's battling with depression or things like that. And being able to have someone that you can lean on, kind of help you talk through those issues, scenarios, and come out a stronger person from it. And I think that most importantly, like people having that comfort level to be able to kind of look within, understand where there may be some deficiencies in their life, and not feel bad about asking for help. And that's with anything that you have going on in life. And I think especially when you deal in times like this, that's when you should be even more proactive to go out there and seek those resources if you feel like you need assistance with something.
Man, I 100% I agree with everything you're saying. And it's funny when you were talking about like yourself, like if you were today had to deal with this, what I heard is that you just still stay connected to your craft and still, control the things that you can control. And I share this a lot with athletes and teams and coaches is that this is the time where you stay connected to your craft. And this is where you connect with people that feed you and you feed them as well. Because if we can still stay within our routine and still hone in on our craft, what we're doing is we're doing all this hard work in the dark so we can shine the light. So when it is time for us to play, we get the green light, then we're not going backwards or going forwards. We're staying ahead of the curve. But I've seen a lot of athletes and we're living in a very fear-based world right now. So
Mhm.
a lot of this stuff is paralyzing athletes and coaches, but you're right. People, they need to feel vulnerable. They need to show up. And I don't take credit for this, but my mentor talks about this phrase he uses: victory goes to the vulnerable. There's so much victory when you open up, when you can actually go talk to somebody and share something. It's not weak. It's actually pretty strong. So I think, with what you're saying, I echo what you're saying is that we need it. It's okay for us to talk about how we're feeling, even if it's shitty.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that 100% wholeheartedly.
Totally, totally. So let's get into what you're doing now. I have to say this because not too long ago I had your wife on the show,
Hmm.
and it's so funny that when she started talking about her company, there was a shift. Like she got really excited. When I had Drew Bledsoe on my show and he was talking about, you know, transitioning into a winemaker, there was this shift. When I started talking to Jake Plummer about what he's doing, there was this shift. Like, do you feel like with all the things that you've learned as an athlete, and we'll talk about some of those attributes, when you start talking about being an entrepreneur and all the things that you're doing right now, like, because I know you're doing a couple different things,
Yeah.
do you feel that there's this like this shift, this light, um, this spark? There you go. That's probably a
Yeah.
better word for it.
Yeah. I believe there's definitely a spark because um, the one thing that I've been able to do, even though I've kind of dabbled in a lot of things, is there are things that I'm passionate about, that I care about, that I don't mind waking up early in the morning and researching on, reading about to make sure that I'm up to speed on everything that's going on. And I believe like when you speak to my wife about her granola company, like that's her baby. And so she's going to invest as much time as possible into that in order to see it grow. And so she can see the fruits of her labor. And like you can hear that and you can see that in her energy and in her voice.
Yeah.
And I feel like, it's tough to find something that um, I was as passionate about as football because my dad was a football coach. I played football from the age of 6 all the way up until I retired, and then I didn't get to end my career on my terms. And so, for a time, it was like I didn't watch the NFL. Like I was far removed from the game, and when you finish your career in 2009, so it's at during like a recession at the same time, and you
Right.
have no work experience besides playing football. So, there's a lot that can be stacked up against you, but at the same time, you go back to that mindset where it's just like, I'm gonna control what I can control. And I was able to kind of network myself I back into the Stanford network, and I got hooked up with like a commercial real estate firm. And instead of trying to demand someone pay me, I'm a former Stanford guy. I used to play in the NFL. Like, you owe me this, you owe me that. Like, hey, I'll come work with you guys for free. This is something I'm interested in. Let me prove my worth, and then hopefully, one day, I can start getting paid. And that's how I started off as an unpaid intern. And I worked my way up into being a vice president until I kind of branched off and started my own residential development company. And so I think that's one of those things where the carryover from sports was definitely applicable to life after ball, where it's like you have to prove yourself that you belong and that you can execute and that you can produce. And the only way you can do that is the preparation and the time that you put in leading up
Right.
into that moment to where you can actually show that you can actually like show the fruits of your labor. And so, it's one of those things where um, I can't say that I'm as passionate about like the commercial real estate as I was about football, but then I started my own residential development company, and it was like something like I'm starting my own thing, and so I was passionate about that. And what actually drew me back into football was, my boys from college wrote me into playing fantasy football, and so I started playing fantasy. I got roped into like being a fantasy football analyst for Yahoo. And so I started off the same way I started my commercial real estate career, where like, all right, I'm just come and do the show for free, show that, I know what I'm talking about, that I'm belong, I could be entertaining, I can, be informative to the fans and the consumers. And then I kind of parlay that into like a 5, 6, 7 year stint with Yahoo, where I cover, NFL, fantasy football, college football, everything in between. And on top of that, I've been really, interested in learning about companies, invest in my own stock portfolio. And so it's one of those things where I wake up early in the morning each and every day, reading up on companies, reading up on stocks, trying to judge which way the momentum in the market is going on a particular day, and trying to make sure that, I use the same approach as far as like due diligence and taking care of, noticing trends in the market and making sure that instead of being a little bit too shy, that, you know, I'm I'm informed, but when I see an opportunity, that I'm going to take advantage of it versus just kind of sitting on my hands. And so that's things where, I've kind of learned all those things through ball, but then it's applicable to all the various ventures that I've explored in life after football.
You know, I have tons of questions here, but since you are heavy in the stocks, do you have any advice on on a hot stock right now?
Actually, I've been really interested in the vaccine stocks because, I'm looking forward to being able to travel, go see my family back in Mississippi whenever I want to. Like the last time I visited my parents, it was before the season started, and I actually drove cross country with my wife. And so we
Huh,
made that drive to Mississippi because I didn't want to compromise my parents' health, and then I ended up flying back here to California.
right.
And so, you know, I advise everyone, to try to take the vaccine. I mean, it's amazing how quickly that we rolled the vaccines out. The only thing I feel about like the early round of vaccines is that they'll probably limit the symptoms that you have if you were to contract COVID, but I
Mhm.
don't know if they actually prevent you from contracting it and transmitting it to other folks. But I'm really high on some of these second generation vaccines that may create a mucosal response that actually prevents you from getting COVID and transmitting to other folks. And one of them actually comes in a pill form. And so I'm hopeful that a lot of people in the US and around the world will hear about this one small company in San Francisco called Vaxart in the next month or two. And if you do, that means that their data coming out from their phase 1 trial should be really good. And then at the same time, that means that hopefully us as a nation and us as a world would be a lot closer to getting back to some sense of normalcy, because instead of having to ship out vaccines and cold chain where it kind of limits the more to do countries that have a lot of access to capital to getting the vaccines, this would be vaccines that you can ship to Africa and all these other places that may not have the cold chain storage that we will have in like the US and the UK and stuff like that, reach that herd immunity, so whereas us as a
Wow.
world can get back to normal. So that's what I'm hoping on.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
And I love it too because it just seems like the approach streamlines it and because it's faster and quicker to people. And it seems like obviously to vaccinate all these people, you got to have an approach, you have a plan in place. But I think storing it is kind of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but storing it and having all the cold storage is kind of throwing a curveball and making sure that they can time all this
Right.
and get it out to the right people. Whereas if you had a pill,
Yeah, if you have a room temperature stable pill, I mean, it's easy to ship, it's easy to store, it has like a long shelf life. And so That would be our quickest way to herd immunity, where we'd be able to have enough people vaccinated. And at the same time, too, I mean, we've all had like our vaccination shots, but I feel that, the vast majority of the people, as long as that they know that the company and the vaccine has been, truly vetted and is safe, they'll much rather take a pill versus getting a shot for a vaccine, especially when you think about adults, kids, and everything else. So
Right.
hopefully that's something that we can get handled, whether it's that company that I talked about or some of these other ones that are coming along with other vaccines. I mean, I think the
Mhm.
most important thing is just kind of getting back to that sense of connectivity, that sense of community. Like it's,
Totally.
we live in strange times right now where there's like so much divisiveness and stuff like that. And it's kind of easy to continue to feed into that because everyone's just kind of bunkered down and hunkered into their own like little shells right now because we can't really go out and commune with other folks. And so getting back to that sense where we can kind of hug each other, get intimate with each other, and try to build back that human connectivity, I think that will go a long way to kind of getting everyone back to where we need to be as people, as a society.
So 100%, 100%, man. It's to me, I feel like as humans, we're put on this earth to connect and create community, and also solve problems too. But I think
Mhm.
that's the main thing. That's how we move in the world. We connect, and so I'm with you on that. You know, whatever the new normal is going to be, whatever that is, as long as that we can go outside and we can connect and
Mhm.
we can really communicate, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'm with you on that. Um, Man, I can talk to you for days, man. There's so many other questions I want to throw at you, but you know, before I wrap up here, I love this question about reflection. And so, when you think about you reflecting on your career as a football player and also as an entrepreneur, what do you think you've learned the most about yourself?
um, I think the one thing that I've learned is that um, probably that whatever you think you can't handle, you probably can.
Mm,
um like whether it's like dealing with injuries or adversity as far as like not getting scholarships or dealing with adversity, whether it's like some issue that may come up with the job or people deal with adversity in their relationships. And it's just one of those things where understanding that anything that comes on your plate, if you're willing to handle it and put in the time to kind of actually understand what's going on and try to resolve it to the best of your ability, and then not only just kind of sit and just kind of weigh yourself down with it, but actually take care of an issue and then move forward and move beyond it, and then come out of it as a better person, as a better man than you went into it before. I think that is key. And so, I mean, I think a lot of what I've talked about here today is like being able to deal with adversity and come
yeah,
out of it better than what you went in. And I think as long as you have that mindset, you should be able to um, thrive with thrive out of any issue that may be put in your way in life.
totally, man. I'm a huge proponent of, when it comes to adversity, because I had to deal with a lot of it life after football for myself. But where there's a crisis, there's an opportunity, but you have to allow yourself to see the opportunity.
Mhm.
And so, and for you, like talking about all the things you got to go through, you can tell that like since you're a competitor, right, you're not going to give up. So moving through it, it's really cool to hear your story and how you think, especially at elite level. It's awesome. How can my listeners connect with you, follow you, learn more about fantasy football, if you will?
Yeah. So my handles on social media is at Tank Williams 13. I promise I'm gonna be better. I kind of went into like a hermit cave the the middle part of 2020, just kind of staying off of social media. And I think it's one of those things that we talked about. You just kind of sometimes have to get away from everything and just
Yeah.
self-care and just kind of take care of yourself, take care of the ones around you. But like I'm trying to come out of my shell now. And so you'll see more of me on IG or Twitter and stuff like that. I love yucking it up, whether it's about, sports and everything else in between, my favorite TV shows. So yeah, you can follow me there, and hopefully we can have a couple laughs and whatever it is to try to hopefully, kind of take care of each other and kind of, placate to each other until we get back to normal.
Totally. Absolutely.
uh,
Tank, man, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your mindset, your passion, man. It was an honor to have you on the show, and I know my listeners are going to enjoy it. So thank you again for being on the show today.
yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks again for having me on. It was a pleasure just kind of going back and recount a lot of memories that I really haven't really thought about too much with my past football career and everything else. So a pleasure talking ball with you. Look forward to doing it again.
All right. Perfect.